One of the most important ingredients in planning is goal setting. Not only is it important for us to set goals, but the way we set goals and the timing of goal setting really matter a great deal. When people sit down and start planning, probably the most common mistake that they make is that they start with what they're going to do before they think about where they want to end up. If you think about trying to plan a holiday, that would be a ridiculous approach. For example, if you sat down and started saving for plane fare when what you wanted to do was go camping, or if you started trying to buy tickets for a train so that you could travel across the ocean, you wouldn't get very far. So it's counterintuitive for some people, but before we start thinking about what we're going to do, who's going to do it, or when, instead, we must first think about what we want to achieve, or the desired outcome, and that's called a goal. So before you decide on strategies, determine what you aim to accomplish. Goals are sometimes referred to by other means. Outcomes, achievements, results are all examples. Sometimes objectives and aims are also used in the same way. They tell you when you're finished your program that you've done what you set out to do. And because you know what it looks like at the end, they suggest what things will look like at various midpoints along the way. We call those goals or sub-goals along the way indicators. So for example, if your goal was to be in Vancouver in an hour, you might say, hey, I'm in Maple Ridge in a half an hour. I'm roughly halfway there after half the time. The indication is that I'm on track. So we start by looking at what our baseline is. You'll remember that the baseline is the before photo, and think about the goal we want the person to achieve. So let's pretend that our goal is to save $6,000 because we have a car that costs $6,000. We want a car that costs $6,000. We look at our baseline, and we'll keep it simple by saying we have $0 in our bank account, and that might be realistic given the fact that you're all students. And so we start from 0 and we want to get to 6,000. And let's say we know we want to get that car before the end of June so that we can go on a road trip. So we've got approximately 3 months to do that. Well, if we're going to go from 0 to 6,000, we know we have to save 2,000 every month. We have to save 2,000 at the end of the first 30 days, we'll be at 4,000 at the end of the next 30 days, and it's 6,000 at the end of our last 30 days, or 90 days. So that's an example of indicators. And if somebody said to you at the end of the first month, how are you doing? And you knew that you had $4,000 in your bank account, you could say, I am going to beat my goal. Or if you only had $1,000 in the bank, you could say, I'm probably going to need to work harder or get more hours or extend my deadline. So you would know if you're on track. And that's an important thing for us because people expect us to be accountable. So we're going to learn a mnemonic or a tool that helps us to write goals correctly. And it's called SMART Plus. SMART Plus goals can be challenging for people, but we're going to take our time and work through them carefully. And once you do, you'll be able to recognize the difference between a SMART Plus goal and one that isn't when you're out there in the real world. And you'll also start to see how big of a difference it makes for a goal to be SMART Plus. So SMART Plus goals stands for the following. Your goal must be specific, measurable, it must address the need, and it must be realistic. It must specify a time by which it will be completed, and it must be expressed in a positive way. Let's go through each of those slowly. If a goal is specific, you can tell exactly what it is it's trying to achieve. Words like be, learn, or try will not be good examples of specific goals. A specific goal is a very clear goal that any person looking at it would understand. For example, if I said to you, I will come back from the grocery store with 3 tomatoes, and I came back with only 2, you would know I hadn't achieved my goal because it's that specific. Or if I came back with 3 oranges and no tomatoes, you'd say even though the measure is correct, the item isn't. If I told you I was coming back from the grocery store with something that was healthy, it wouldn't be clear enough. You and I might have a very different definition of healthy. For example, I might come back with a case of Diet Coke and some Hawkins cheesies. And let's be honest, that's exactly what I would do. So we want it to be specific and we want it to be measurable. So I gave you an example of measurable in my little silly example there, but we might also measure things like weight or the score a person gets on a test or the amount of time that they spend in their seat or the number of times in a day that they use their diaper. We can count what they did that we don't want to have happen anymore, like using a diaper, or what they're supposed to do, like using the potty. Or we can count the number of problem incidents, such as, for example, acting out behaviors, or the number of days without incidents, which we might call good days. A SMART Plus goal must describe and must show that the need has been addressed. This confuses a lot of people. For example, I often see people give me a goal when an individual has the need of losing weight, and they create a goal that says a person will go to a gym a certain number of times or that they will enroll in Weight Watchers. But neither of those things are evidence of the goal being achieved. They're steps or strategies instead of goals. And this is one of the most common things people do, is accidentally give me strategies instead of goals. If a person needs to lose 20 pounds, then the goal would be that their current weight will be that their weight in whatever amount of time will be 20 pounds less than what they currently have. It has to be realistic as well. Using our weight loss example, we wouldn't expect somebody to lose 20 pounds in a week. We want it to be something that is achievable, and realistic and achievable are closely associated. Realistic also includes whether or not a person has too many goals at one time, or whether the staff people or agency have all the resources they need to help somebody achieve the goal, or whether an individual is yet ready. For example, maybe they aren't physically healthy enough for something to be realistic. It has to have an end time, and again, that's part of the specifics. The end time isn't always a specific date on a calendar. It could be, for example, a date that we recognize by another name, such as by Christmas or by the first day of spring. So it's not always going to be a specific date on a calendar. Make sure you do not identify the date that a person starts something or the times and dates that they do certain activities. Instead, you're describing the end date. So it's the last possible day by which the person can achieve their goal. They can beat it, they can get done faster than that date, but it's essentially the deadline for the goal. And the positively expressed means it's expressed as something that will be accomplished or done, not something that will be stopped or lost or quit. For example, rather than saying that Mark will lose 20 pounds, instead we might say Mark will weigh 140 pounds. Instead of saying that Mark will stop smoking, we would instead say that Mark will go for a certain number of days without a cigarette. And that's how we would be able to identify that he was no longer a smoker. We'd have to work to define what that meant. Let's take a look. Here's some examples. Lucy will tie her own shoes by June 22nd. We know exactly who she is and what she will do. We know that it's almost guaranteed that her need is that she currently cannot tie her own shoes. And so this goal proves that her need has been met. So we'll give her a pair of shoes leading up to June 22nd. She might do it on June 20th or June 16th. But one day between now and June 22nd, she will tie her own shoes. And when that's done, so is our program. Kareem will ski down a green run without falling by the end of the ski season. This is a much better goal than simply saying Kareem will ski, because skiing can mean a whole range of things. If Kareem is a new skier, we wouldn't want something unrealistic like having him go down a mogul run. We might have him go down a green run and not worry about things like grace or timing, but simply count the number of falls. Without falling is 0. And going down the green run one time without falling any times by the end of whatever day is the ski season would be a concrete example that his need is met. Now you might be thinking, how much of a need is it for somebody to ski. Well, this is an important moment because when we're doing planning for people, we don't differentiate between wants and needs. Imagine how it would feel if somebody came up to you and said that your needs weren't needs, but were just wants. You probably wouldn't feel very supported. The Canucks will win the Stanley Cup this year is another one. Now, some would argue whether or not this is realistic, but that's certainly the goal that that team would have at the beginning of every season. It's a very specific moment, it's a very specific outcome, and it would reflect the idea that they have met all of their expectations for the year. It's the symbol that they have been a good team. We don't need to know what specific day the hockey season ends because we know that whatever day it is our specific time. It's written as a positive. It doesn't describe that the Canucks will not lose or will not fail. It describes what they will do. I will fit into my skinny jeans before my high school reunion is a way of describing weight loss or fitness without having to use a number. There are lots of other ways we can describe fitness or weight loss, such as a person's weight, their measurements around their waist, or how many laps they can do in a pool. So it's not always by looking at the scale. And a high school reunion is occurring on a specific date. So even if the person doesn't put that date into this statement, it is an end date. Now, the one thing we can't tell for sure is how far into the future their high school reunion is, and neither can we tell how much work they're going to have to do to fit in their skinny jeans, but we can presume that this is realistic. By the end of this class, each student will have written 3 Smart Plus goals without any help. And by the way, that's actually what I'm going to expect you to do, but you can see that it has all of the ingredients. It has a measure, 3. It says what I expect you to do and the thing I'm looking for. It gives a timeline, in this case by the end of the class, and it even says what limitation there is. So you're supposed to do it on your own. What are some of the common errors when people write goals? I said some of them already. When writing the date, don't describe what a person does at the beginning. For example, signing up for a gym is not a goal. It's what happens at the end that matters. Now, sometimes the need really does make a difference here. So let's talk about a person who's agoraphobic, for example. This is a person, if you remember your prior learning, who might be afraid to go out into the community. For that person, signing up to go to a course would represent a huge milestone for them. So we would consider that to be a pretty good outcome. But typically we would think about something like signing up for a gym to be the beginning of a process for somebody who is looking to lose weight. Don't forget that the end point has to be dependent upon what the individual's needs are. You don't describe how it will be done at all in a goal. We're going to do that later on. In fact, we're going to have to break it into specific steps. What we're going to do is simply describe what will be accomplished. Don't describe what the person will try or learn. Never use those words. For example, if you said to me, Paul, I learned the material, but I didn't pass the test, I would say, sorry, you didn't pass the course. You didn't achieve the goal. You need to demonstrate it, and that means we would use a verb like passing the test or earning a score of 70%. So those words of try and learn are almost always going to get you in trouble. I can't think of a circumstance where they wouldn't. When we think about the endpoints for goals in a service planning environment like ours, we usually think about something that is 3 to 12 months away. If it's less than 3 months, it probably doesn't require the sort of work and collaboration and step-by-step deliberacy that we're going through here. And something more than 12 months away is considered a long-term goal, and we don't normally get into that level of detail that far into the future because so much can change. Remember as well to be realistic when considering resources and other priorities. It can be very tempting for people to create lists of 10, 12, or 15 goals, and that's not realistic. 3 is a good number. 5 is pushing it. Don't use words like stop, lose, quit, or other negative language. Instead, find the positive way of saying things. Describe what will be accomplished, and that's the plus part. Here are some examples of what not to do. Glenn will try skiing before March 31st. There's that word try. And it also says what he's going to do to start. Now, if he's working on fear, this might be different. But if what he's trying to do is be a skier, then it's not helping us. Irving will learn fractions. Well, I don't know what learn means. Everything else is good here, but Irving will pass his fractions test, would fix this up nicely. Kevin will go bowling for 12 consecutive weeks. That doesn't tell me whether he's become a good bowler or whether he's made a friend at bowling or whether he's achieved his dream of winning a trophy. And I would rather we talk about something like the number of friends he makes or how much he improves his score in his bowling game or whether he wins a trophy. Those would all be desirable outcomes. Judith will lose 38 pounds and stop smoking. We have two issues here. First, we should have two separate statements because these are not connected to each other. A person could, for example, do one without the other. But rather than describing the negatives of losing 38 pounds or stopping smoking, I've already said earlier, we should instead identify what the target weight is and how many cigarettes a person will smoke in a day, typically 0, and how many days we want them to go without smoking a cigarette. If we were looking for her to be more fit, then we might find lots of other ways to describe fitness, such as how many miles she can walk or what her resting heart rate might be. Anne will be a dancer by this time next year. Pretty good, except I'd really like to know what we're going to mean by being a dancer. For example, will she be in a recital? Will she get a particular mark on a particular lesson or test? Will she be identified as the lead dancer in a production? We need to be more specific. And Rex will start Weight Watchers by February 15th. Starting isn't the goal. It's a great first step, but our target here clearly is to do with how much weight he will lose. So again, just like the Judith one above, we need to identify his target weight, and that will become his goal. So here's your first exercise, and we're going to get you to pause the video after each exercise, and we're going to have a conversation online hearing your answers. So you're going to go and you're going to put these up on Facebook, and we're going to take a look at your answers and talk about them in each case. There are a number of exercises, but I'm going to get you to do each one at a time so that you can gradually shape your learning. In exercise 5, I want you to see if you can set a Smart Plus goal for each of the following. And we'll talk about one of them. We'll go through all of them later on. All right. Pause and do that. In exercise 6, I simply want you to take a look at these and describe whether they are or are not Smart Plus goals and give a reason why or why not. In some cases, there might be more than one thing that is wrong. Again, pause and put your answers on the Facebook page and we'll discuss them. Exercise number 7 asks you to fix these goals, see if you can make them better. Again, pause, put your answers on the Facebook page, and we'll talk about them. And lastly, exercise number 8, I said I would get you to create 3 by the time the day is done. I'll get you to do at least 1 on the Facebook page. This is a Smart Plus goal for yourself. It can be for anything you want it to be for. It can be completely made up, but set a Smart Plus goal for yourself on the Facebook page, and we will discuss them. That's the end of this lesson, and we'll go on from here to talk about how we prepare for the meetings.